Hi, Roxana. How are you?
I'm fine. Hi, how are you, Deborah? It's nice to see you.
It's really nice to see you. I've been a huge admirer of your work forever, and this is a real treat for me to get to actually interview you about leaving, which I ignored family and lover for 2 days to finish. It was that good. I'm going to read your biography just so everybody knows who you are. Roxana Robinson is the award-winning author of 6 novels and 3 short story collections. Her fiction has appeared in The New Yorker, Atlantic, Harper's, The Best American Short Stories, and other publications. She has received fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts and from the Guggenheim Foundation. She lives in New York City and Connecticut, spends as much time as she can in Maine, and teaches in the MFA program at Hunter College. So, I mean, my first question to you is, this felt so real. Sarah and Warren felt so real to me. Was there a Warren in your life, or was this completely just an idea that you had and went with it?
There is no Warren in my life. This is fictional. I've been happily married for 48 years. So this is not drawn from my life.
At all. And what was the germ of this book? That's what I'm fascinated by. Did you talk to someone who'd had a midlife? It because I am going through my own midlife new love affair, which is a year and a half old right now. It feels so real to me that I felt like, did you have a conversation with a friend? How did you imagine this so perfectly?
So it came from a number of sources, but I mean, everything I write about is drawn from the world around me, that things that I find interesting or disturbing. And with this sort of situation, I started noticing that things were changing around me in ways that I hadn't noticed.
Mhm.
I had, I had several friends who were in relationships and wouldn't give up their houses or their apartments. I had two couple friends who had apartments 5 blocks apart, and neither one of them would give them up
Right.
because they just, they'd lived there for years. They had all their stuff. They were used to it, and they could afford to do it. But also it just seemed so different from the dynamic of the 20-year-olds, which is, let's get in together.
Yeah.
Let's join. And then I remember meeting a man, and this was 10 or 15 years ago, meeting an older man that I didn't know at some party, and I was just being polite and also nosy like a writer and saying,
Yes.
how long have you been here? It was in Maine. How long have you been coming here, and where do you live? And from the way he talked, it became so he's like in his 70s or 80s. It became it seemed to me that it was becoming apparent that he was not married to the woman he was with. And I finally said, so you and he said, we're living in sin. And I thought, oh, that's really interesting. When that, when that idea kind of surfaced in American culture, it was to shock the bourgeoisie. That was the whole point. But he was the bourgeoisie. He was that layer of very. This was at a fundraiser. He was very affluent and settled, and he was not trying to overthrow the Catholic Church. And he smiled as he said it, and I said, "Oh, that's so interesting." And he said, "Well, we both have children. Our wills are made. Our finances are settled. It would just cause an uproar if we got married and had to change everything." And I thought that's really interesting because one of the reasons that you got married is for financial and dynastic,
Mhm.
uh, those issues. And if you get together in your 70s, those issues are no longer present. So I was starting to see that. And then I was at a family party, and again, I was talking to an older woman. I was probably 50 and she was 75.
Mhm.
And she was a little old lady with permed white hair and white pearls and a little dress. And she said, and she was quite perky. And she said, now I was standing right here in this room when I looked across the room and I saw Peter. And I knew right then I would marry him. I just fell in love in that moment. And
Mm.
I said, "Oh, that's so wonderful. And did you?" And she said, "Yes, I did." And I said, "And how long ago was that?" She said, "3 years ago."
Oh,
So I thought, okay, there's stuff going on that I have not been paying attention to.
right.
And I also heard about adult children,
Oh,
being indignant and making trouble. One much older friend of mine told me that her relationship with a man had been destroyed. I mean, his children had persuaded him just to walk away from her. So I could see that there were things going on in the culture that I had not been aware of, and that I became really interested in this idea of a relationship, a romantic relationship, um, over 50, that was still, I mean, at 60, you're still very physically, um, you're
vigorous.
vigorous and vital, and you're in full possession of all your attributes, your physical attributes. You're not going to have children. That's a big difference, but you feel fine. You feel more or less the way you did when you were 40. So what are the differences between the 20? We've heard many, many versions of the romance in the 20s and in the 30s and of the midlife crisis 40s. But really, we haven't heard about what happens to healthy people in their 60s, because the dynamics are totally, totally different.
Yeah, and again, living that reality right now, I am actually surprised. I didn't look up anything about you. I didn't look up any interviews because I wanted to have this conversation fresh. I absolutely assumed, even though I read the acknowledgments and you said, you said thank you to your husband and your kids, I just kind of thought, well, maybe that's the new husband. I really assumed that you were living in my house and that you you could see everything going on, including the fact that my daughter's about to get married, by the way. Um, and I would say, even, speaking from real life, she's not like Kat at all. None of my kids are like Kat at all. Kat is, for those of us who are listening, Kat is the child who really put a barrier between Sarah and Warren by telling Warren that he would not be allowed to her wedding, if he divorced her mom. But, because of various traumas that I had to put my children through, from divorce and then a second relationship that didn't work out, they are obviously in a state where they want to make sure that the person that I'm, spending my time with is worthy of their mother, right? I think in my children's case, I think it's very protective. They don't want me to get hurt again. And I just found the dynamics so, so fascinating. Now, you start off at a performance of Tosca. I imagine it's at Lincoln Center, correct?
Yeah.
And I've never seen Tosca, but I do know that it's a story about a woman who's married, who's in love with a man, and then there's this horrible policeman, and he tries to get involved, and he wants to have sex with her, and he wants to kill the lover. So it's a tragic tale. So I was hoping, and I'm not going to ruin the ending here, but I was hoping that they would overcome sort of the tragedy of Tosca and live their lives together. But there was a moment where they just can't live their lives together. And there's it's a moment on page 301 where Sarah has just made the decision that this is her life. She is now living in a state of absence, and that absence is the presence in her life. And you describe it so well. If you wouldn't mind starting with the thing about absence and ending with live around it, that would be amazing, please.
The thing about absence is that it is always there. He is always absent from her life. Each time she faces this thought, accepts it, and moves on, it reappears. He is always absent from every plan she makes, every thought, every idea, every room, from her future. He is always absent. She can never reach him. The days are gray now. She can't help but go on with things. His absence is the largest thing in her life. She has to live around it.
I love that last sentence. She has to live around it. And what's interesting to me is that Sarah, unlike Warren, really find some joy in living around it. And how she does that is through her children, and especially the youngest grandchild. Nate is the youngest grandchild, I think.
Jane, Jane.
James. So there's Busby, James, James. So her daughter, Meg decides to have a third child. By the way, I had a third child later in life too. I literally felt like she got into my house. Um, and I loved the grandmother relationship between Sarah and her grandson James, which is this decision she makes. She says, "Oh, I was not involved as much as I wanted to be in the lives of Busby and Nate. And with this third grandchild, she's given a third chance to really form a bond with that grandchild." And I literally said to my partner after reading this, I said, as soon as my daughter has children, which I think is soon, right? I am going to take every Friday and pick that child up from school, getting the idea from you. Which, do you have grandchildren?
I do.
And are you able to pick them up at school or?
No, they live too far away for that.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a sadness for me.
Well, if my daughter doesn't move to New York, that's going to be a sadness for me too, because I'm not going to move to live near the grandchild. But I do think it would be great, Sasha, if you're listening, to have that grandchild nearby. And I also really loved the ending. I'm not going to ruin the real ending, but before the ending, where Sarah is in Long Island with her family around her, and there's this lovely moment where her daughter becomes the mother in a way. The daughter sort of steps up and says, "I've been so busy and I didn't really think about it. And my, children and the baby. And, she had this horrible thing happen to her in the hospital giving birth." But then she says to her mom, "How are you?"
Hmm.
She's interested in her mom's inner life. And again, I have a almost 29-year-old and a 27-year-old and a 17-year-old. And the two older ones are really becoming at that age interested in their mother's inner life. And it is a whole new relationship as a parent. And I just felt like you were able in this book about a couple that sort of were star-crossed because they met in their early years and then didn't get together, but you were able to create an entire universe from this one couple. And I was astounded by this book. I haven't had a book grip me this hard. I don't know, maybe since Anna Karenina. I was truly, no, I couldn't stop reading. And and I know COVID was hard for all of us, but for me, it was really hard for reading. I wasn't able to read. I was so nervous about getting, I was sick, whatever, but I haven't had an experience of really being in a book since at least before COVID. So I thank you for that. One other really bizarre coincidence here is, guess where I was in the late 80s? Early 90s, Bucharest.
No.
I was like, how did she? So I was a war photographer back then, and I covered the fall of Ceausescu from late 89 to like, post nine. And by the way, Sarah's right. She did not want to be in Bucharest. There was no food. The bread was terrible. It was gray and dusty and smelled like urine in every single, like, of course she didn't want to go to Bucharest. And that is one of the key moments in this book where Warren says to her, "Let's go to Bucharest together." And she's like, "Who is this man? Why would I ever want to be with this man?" And then she chooses the wrong guy. I love this book so, so much. What has been the reaction to readers that you've had so far? I'm interested. It's been out for what, 2 weeks now?
Yeah, yeah. It came out on February 13th.
Tell me what readers have been saying, what your friends have been saying. I'm interested to hear.
It's been, I mean, the people who have reached out to me obviously have been positive. Nobody has reached out and said they hated it. But a lot of people have said things similar to yours, and also the word Anna Karenina has been mentioned before.
Oh, wow.
So
Yeah.
that is very, very, I feel very honored to have our books in the same sentence.
Yeah.
Um, uh, So a lot of people have talked about the mother-daughter relationship. I mean, one of the things that interested me in writing this book was the kind of the asymmetry that there is between mothers and daughters. That and I start out in the beginning of the book when Sarah and Warren are talking about their past friendship and when they knew each other when they were much younger, and talking about their parents and saying, you know, when you're little, Sarah says, when you're little, um, when your child is little, you think you own them, and you do own them in a way. They were inside your body. They were your appurtenance, and you, and only you, no matter how great your husband or partner is, you are the one responsible for their survival in every way. Naps, food, hunger, sleep, everything is yours. The human animal takes longer than any other animal in the animal kingdom to become self-sufficient. A deer can run in within 6 hours, something like that. Humans, a human child cannot run away from an enemy till he's 10 years.
If that, yes.
So, so it's the mother who feels this huge burden of responsibility to keep her child alive, keep him happy, but also keep him alive. And the child has no sense of that, no awareness of the risk of that knife on the top of the shelf, no awareness of the risk of the automobile wheels 6 inches from his head. He's just trundling around living his life, and his mother is, you know, her heart is stopping every 25 minutes. And then the child gets older and does become independent and self-sufficient and stops depending on the mother more and more and more, recedes from that and that dependence. And the dependence in the very beginning seems completely natural to the child. It's just like air. The mother's always there to pick him up. And then as the child becomes more independent, which is totally normal, the mother has trouble with that receding presence in her life. She keeps thinking, and you know, some mothers are better at it than others. Some mothers never want to give up. Some mothers want to give up immediately. But the child is kind of unaware of that, and the child is just proceeding into his or her life and never understands that 10 years or whatever it was, 10 years, say, of overweening sense of responsibility and love that will never be returned. There's
Never.
no symmetry. It never comes around so that, or rarely. I mean, maybe
Well,
it does.
I think that there is a moment like when I had kids where I suddenly appreciated the work that my mother did
Right.
and started to get along better with my mother, in
Oh,
fact.
interesting.
Yeah.
So maybe it can become symmetrical. Um, and certainly, yeah, when your daughter has children, then she may suddenly think, huh.
Yeah, I always say that you're like when you're a parent of a 2-year-old, you're on suicide watch for years because they don't know they're about to commit suicide, but you know they're standing next to that wave. They're standing between cars. They're about to cross the street when the red is like you're constantly on suicide watch.
Totally right. And your adrenaline is just constantly going,
Yeah,
and they're completely unaware of it. They should
totally.
be.
Yeah,
Um, so that, and that never happens again. I mean, your daughter presumably will never be that way towards you.
right.
It just never,
No, never, never, never.
it's
So
asymmetric.
So there was also a really beautiful moment at the end with Josh, Sarah's son. And Josh was in a relationship and the relationship breaks up and I don't remember exactly what it said, but he was just like, it just didn't work out. And he was really accepting of this. And Sarah was kind of, you know, you could sense her inability to accept that. Like, well, why didn't it work out? She wants to know why. There has to be a reason why. But I do think that we find at the end that Sarah is accepting of this absence, this presence of this absence. Warren, I wanted to shake him at the end. I wanted to shake him and just say, the wedding's over. You wrote your daughter a letter. What else can you do? It's time to live your life. Anyway, I love this book so much. I really, really want to thank you for writing it, and I can't wait to share it with my readers. And um, is there something that you're working on now, or are you just sort of dealing with the book now, this book as it is now?
Both. I have started another novel, and it's hard to write during all this
Yeah, yeah.
motion.
Yeah, forget it. There's too much commotion. I know. Well, I hope that the commotion goes on. I hope that this becomes a movie. I think it is really, really, really beautiful. And I commend you for stepping into my life and just, writing about it. I appreciate it so much.
Well, thank you so much. This has been great to talk about it.
Thank you. I'm going to press stop on the record and stay on for a few minutes. Thank you so much for joining. Hold on. Stop recording.